new drugs and treatments to take more than 14 years to go to market, 14, 1 4, and costing more than 400 million. That's exceedingly slow. Prospera is a developer of a new governance model that they bring into the real world. They have a special economic zone in Roatan, Honduras, on about 400 acres of land of this island as a tropical paradise. Prosper can make to a large degree its own laws. The longevity paradigm is basically saying that aging is causing all these other diseases. And if we treat aging itself directly, we can reduce multiple diseases at the same time.
Athens, Rome, London, Shenzhen, Silicon Valley, Singapore. Could it be the next thing where things might be happening that changes the entire world is going to be Prospera? That's the question for today. And with me today, I have Niklas Anzinger, right? Welcome to the show.
Good to be here, Adam. Thanks for having me.
We have a big topic. Let's start with Prospera and you. Just a quick intro to Prospera and what's your personal stake in that project.
For sure. So Prospera is a developer of a new governance model that they bring into the real world. They have a special economic zone in Roatan, Honduras, which passed enabling legislation that allows Prospera a large degree of legal autonomy. So on about 400 acres of land of this island, which has about the size of Hong Kong and about 100,000 inhabitants, as a tropical paradise, Prospera can make to a large degree its own laws. Not fully, it's still a subdivision of the Honduran state, but it can make its own medical, financial, labor laws. You can have your tax residency there. You can incorporate companies there. And I found out about Prospera a bit more than 3.5 years ago when I became very frustrated with the limitations on entrepreneurs. There's many areas such as energy or housing or biotech that are just overregulated and are preventing us from developing better solutions for people. And what really fascinated or intrigued me about Prospera that they are upgrading the legal system that we run on, right? So use insurance, use 3D property rights on the blockchain and things like that to really innovate in how we live together and how we make rules and how that enables technology and economic growth. Like, in fact, I was so fascinated that my thought was 3.5 years ago, if we make this work, we change the world, we make history. And this is what compelled me to move there together with my wife to start first a VC fund and now Infinita City.
When I visited Prospera and in there, the Duna building, there's a co-working space, and in a co-working space, there is a library. And that library is full of your favorite books, right? Now, I have not seen this book in there, but I have a feeling that you might have read Atlas Shrugged from Ayn Rand. Did you?
Funnily enough, I have not read it. I tried it several times. Like, I know of her philosophy and I know how everyone in this space have read it, but for some reason I didn't get into it. I mean, I read much of like the economics literature and things like that, but for some reason that book I haven't yet made it through. But it's there, it's in the library, so I'm reminding myself that I need to eventually read it.
Yeah, it's a very, very long one. It took me years to listen to it. But in there is a concept, without too much spoilers, is that there is a concept that the competent people of the world gave up trying to be the slaves of the incompetent people of the world and moved to a special place, also in Americas, which was called Galt's Gulch. Galt is Jean Galt. I don't want to spoil who is Jean Galt. That's the main question of the book. But can we describe Prospera similarly? That, hey, this is the place where the people the doers who want to make the future happen are coming. Do you see it this way?
This is partly the case and partly not entirely the case, right? So yes, it is kind of designed for entrepreneurs, and that's the main thing we're looking for, who are able to start their own businesses, whether it's traditional business, restaurants, or real estate, or construction, or like very advanced things like biotech or AI or crypto. So we have a very strong focus on bringing these kinds of people. They're coming from Silicon Valley, they're coming from Honduras, they're coming from other parts of Latin America. What is not the case is the impression that some like biased media try to convey us which is like that is like a billionaire haven or enclave. This is not true, right? So more than 50-60% of people here are Hondurans. And this is the primary social license to operate, that we bring economic development to the country. We're very well integrated into the local economy. And there's tons of very positive collaboration with the businesses here and with the countries here. And also the people who are coming here are not the ones who are already rich or have made it. Right, these have already done well in the old order. They're fine in Los Angeles or San Francisco or all of these places. They have options like Dubai or Singapore if they want to go somewhere else. What you find here in Prospera is upstarts. This is people who have an entrepreneurial bent, who have a drive, who have ambition to change the world, but are not yet there. They want to build wealth. They want to build great businesses. We want to show the world that we can build something great here. And this is the place we're at, right? So it's very much, you see lots of other entrepreneurs and that really are hungry to change the world.
Yeah, there was a pool party in there, and I just took a picture in my mind that there was about 20 people up there, and I'm going to count how many entrepreneurs there are. Entrepreneurs defined as they have their own projects, or well, either just launching it or already launched, and it was like 80% of everyone there was someone who's doing their own projects. So that was something to behold. Give me a little bit of context about geography here of Prospera in Honduras, and I guess you're going to probably perhaps tell me about other places in the world, which even not completely clear to me.
Sure. Yeah, so Prospera is on an island in Honduras, not on the mainland, right? So Honduras is often associated with crime and corruption. And on the mainland, you'll find a lot of that. The island is very safe. If it was a US state, would be the fourth safest US state. It has an international airport. There's daily direct flights that take 2 hours from Miami or Houston. So it's fairly easy to reach, at least from the United States. The island has about the size of Hong Kong Island, but only 100,000 inhabitants. So it can grow a lot in population while leaving large parts of nature intact, where Hong Kong Island is only populated on 25% of its territory. It is a tropical paradise. Like, it has this enormous Caribbean beauty, like turquoise, coral reefs, water. It's a scuba diving paradise. It has tropical jungle. At the same time, the temperature doesn't get scorching hot because it has a very nice sea breeze. It's also outside the hurricane zone, right? So there's not a large risk of hurricanes. So this makes it already a massively growing tourism hub. It has about 1 to 2 million tourists each year, mostly from last cruise ships. And honestly gives it a very utopian feeling when you live there. You've probably been on the Bitcoin Center when you were there and you've seen the views of the island. And I always introduce it to people as welcome to the promised land. And you asked also about other locations, right? So in the network state, charter city worlds, there is other places. Special economic zones are nothing unusual, right? So there's several other projects in other parts of Latin America and Asia with Biology's Network School, which is also on a peninsula. Prospera is also pursuing a new venture called Prosper Africa, and they are set to announce a partnership with an African country quite soon. They're also working with the US government on potentially introducing special economic zones there. With Infinita, my business, we also have worked with the state of Montana on a right to try bill to also develop or build a hub there where we can bring the novel therapies that we're developing to a large market.
You mentioned Balaji's network school. How does that actually connect to Prospera in Honduras? Like, what's the practical realities in there?
Yeah. So Balaji Srinivasan is former Coinbase CTO, A16Z investor, and exited several businesses and is now a huge influencer. And he wrote this book called The Network State, which is aiming to describe kind of internet native societies that go into the real world and acquire land and real estate and kind of build their own society and limited degrees of sovereignty, right? So Prospera kind of roughly falls into the space, although its vision also diverges a bit from it because they don't want sovereignty, right? They're under the sovereignty of the country of Honduras. But Balaji is a major influence in that space. He has this conference each year in Singapore. This year it's on October 3, called the Network State Conference, that is basically bringing all the practitioners and thought leaders in this space together to present about their projects. And with the network school, he's aiming to be a key hub or a node that educates and builds the base for network state type populations and projects. So he has a location right next to Singapore in Malaysia in a place called Forest City, which is kind of a ghost town. It was a massive real estate project with 700,000 apartments in the buildings. And that was mostly vacant, and he took it over. And now he has, at any given time, several hundreds of people there who are working on startups and projects, and whom you go through this program of where they educate themselves, where they own money through healthy living and sort of a longevity treatment protocol and things like that. So it's also a major project in the space. Biology is a major supporter also of our project and of Prospera and investor. So he is a major figure in the space.
Yeah, I've talked to many people who either when I was in Prospera, then some people were talking about who came from the network school, and now that I left, I talked to some people like Jesse who went to the network school. Right? Okay, all right. What about the time span here? Let's focus on Honduras part now. What's the time span here? I guess we can divide it to pre-Niklas and post-Niklas.
Sure. So I came about 3.5 years ago. That was in April 2022, and I organized the first independent conference here. And before that, Prospera had about just the time launched to the public. They built the beta building. They got all the learn permits. They negotiated the legal framework with the Honduran government. So that took them about, I'd say, 4 years. So 4 years only to develop the legal framework, have like the digital incorporation software, acquire the land, and have like the first building so you could be there and spend time there and incorporate a business. But up until that point, and when I came, there weren't that many people there. So it was really just Prospera stuff. And that I saw kind of as something that Prospera needed. It needed to grow, it needed people, it needed entrepreneurs to populate it and to build businesses. So I started organizing conferences, bringing startups, investing in them to really help Prospera build a core of its people and population. And 3.5 years later, I brought about 1,500 people, organized several conferences, 2 pop-up cities. Now we have a core of about 40 to 60 permanent residents here who live in the Duna Tower. That's about the same number that regularly goes in and out. During conferences or theme months, we bring about another 100 people. During the pop-up cities, another several hundreds of people. So we are getting closer to a point where it's like a in-person civility where you constantly see the same people. You go to do sports clubs together, you break bread together, and all that, all these community things.
Oh, what kind of people live there, like cyborgs and stuff?
So these are definitely people who are attracted to the ideas behind Prospera and who see this as something that can change the world and where they can personally build the kind of future they want to see. They're typically very pro technology. They're techno optimists, as we like to say. They like crypto. They like AI. Many of them are into biotech, right? So we have people that have done labs here. We have clinical treatments through the GAM clinic. We have the company MiniCircle, which developed gene therapies here, or Unlimited Bio, which recently even treated the Kardashians with their gene therapy. So this is kind of a mix. It's a bit of a West Coast culture, right? So it's very much at the frontier, right? So, and that mixed with also a healthy amount of local entrepreneurs and service workers, right? So not everyone here is like a VC funded startup or high tech. There's also people who run restaurants and shops or like a transportation service and are building the kinds of businesses that any society needs.
All right, let's switch gears here. So I think it was necessary to ask from you the basic questions of what these things are, but it always sound that these questions, like everyone is asking this from you, and you have further answers rehearsed in your mind. Perhaps you could talk to me a bit more about your personal motivation or vision. Why are you even doing this?
Yeah, that's a good question. I definitely always had kind of a fire burning in me from a very young age. And I was looking, how does the world work and how can we change it? How can we achieve big things? Like I was into science fiction. So the ideas of space exploration, becoming cyborgs, and radical life extension, all these ideas appealed to me very strongly. I studied philosophy and economics, so I really wanted to have like precise answers about the big questions. And then I went into policy. I spent some time in Washington, D.C. think tanks because I thought these kinds of things have a very large influence on what is happening in the world. And that's true. At the same time, they are so sclerotic that it's almost impossible to change things. So that was my first experience. And then I switched gears to technology and entrepreneurship, roughly motivated simply by coincidence, really by discovering that I had a second degree cousin that I hadn't known before. And I was always confused because in my family, everyone is like a teacher or social worker, like very local. They don't like look out or have these kinds of ambitions or ideas that I have. But then when I met my second grade cousin, who at the time worked for McKinsey and then later Palantir and also now has his own startup, I discovered, okay, there's other entrepreneurs in my family. And he told me a bit about the startup world, which I didn't know much about. So I joined a company as an early stage operator for about 5 years and helped carry the company to a Series B round where I helped a lot, or I was responsible for developing the product that carried the round later. So during that time, I felt I learned the practical skills of being an entrepreneur, but I hadn't yet meshed it with my vision of the world, with a large and ambitious mission, right? So at the time, and that was in 2020, when COVID just started, I started to look around to explore what is the most ambitious possible mission I could go on. And at that time, the first instinct was actually healthcare, right? And that was because of COVID. And also because the company I was building was in data analytics and machine learning and things like that. So there was amazing technology available through computing. And also at the time, I learned a lot about genomics, which I have a knack or a passion for. Um, I was realizing there was so much amazing technology available. But then I also learned during the COVID pandemic how badly wrong health policy can go and how we actually have all this amazing science and technology available. But the bottleneck is actually human institutions like the FDA, the CDC, and the various health agencies in different countries that make these monopolistic decisions for entire blocks of tens or hundreds of millions of people, or by extension, billions of people, which is, and I had that from my education in economics, is just not a good way to innovate, sort of the centralized top down model. Innovation is more Hayekian, it's more decentralized, it's more trial and error. It's more that you try things out on a small scale, they don't work, you kink them out, and then when they succeed, they can adopt larger scale, right? So this model of innovation I saw was actually lacking in the healthcare space, at least, but by extension also in other areas like energy or housing and things like that. And I saw that there was kind of the systematic problem that the world was facing, kind of the governance and policy layer. And for a while, I didn't really know what to do with these ideas. I spent a ton of time reading. Many of the books in my library come from that time. And many of my podcast guests came from that time when I read all these books. And, it was just typical, like Paul Graham even wrote an essay about that. Like the things where you can do your best work in are the things that keep you kind of awake at night, even though it kind of seems irrational, right? Even though there's no obvious like business interest behind it. Like, what can you do with this, right? You can't just do a CSTAT or whatever. Like we learned that was too expensive, didn't work out. All these ideas seem very utopian. But then I learned about Prospera, and Prospera is kind of the 0 to 1 proof. Actually, you could do things. And I was fascinated by its history of how the Honduran attorneys that changed the legal system in Honduras made it possible, and how Prospera then developed the system based on regulatory flexibility. And this system of regulatory flexibility I found was really the key change that could unlock all this technology and science and innovation that I saw being held back. So I kind of was gravitating consciously or subconsciously to finding Prospera. And then it came all together for me. Now I kind of can understand like where all the economics and policy and all these ideas come together, but I can do something practical with it. Like I'm a pragmatic libertarian, not an ideological one, right? I don't want to like debate. I want to figure out what can we actually do that works in the world as is. And that's what came together for me and led me to do what I do now.
Look, when I was there, so what I noticed, and it is how it was explained to me, that um, the old guard of Prospera, who the founders who created the entire thingy are kind of tired now. In their place came you, who basically is the main mover of the entire project there. So is that still the case? And how do you even shoulder this responsibility?
Yeah. Well, I don't think that's entirely true, right? So the thing I focused on, what they didn't focus on, was the go-to-market part and bringing people. So I share the criticism, which is why I started my business, that they were not nearly doing enough there. Um, but at the same time, they worked on the legal foundations and framework and the diplomacy and the real estate, right? So I didn't raise the funding for the real estate that we have here, which is really necessary and important, or kind of negotiate the deal with the government and now like doing the PR and diplomacy to keep it intact and defend it, nor like the massive arbitration suit, right? So Prospera's work is still foundational to making this work. But you're right, there was a gap that I saw that I wanted to help overcome, kind of telling the world this exists, bringing people and all of that. I think Prospera is now doing more there, right? So they recently hired Lonas, their head of growth, who abandoned a Silicon Valley VC-funded AI startup. He was previously actually the co-founder of Anton, the founder of Lovable, now the fastest growing startup in the world. And he is sort of a founder type who is now doing the things that I've been doing for 3.5 years and is really good at it too. So they have regular Prosper weekends. They acquired or bringing on other layer two partners. So with Infinita, we're kind of a layer two and independent business. We're building a biotech district and a biotech community and a faster go-to-market for companies. And now Lonas brought someone who's building a Bitcoin district. And we're now talking to someone to build a longevity wellness, more wellness-focused district. And someone else, there's other entrepreneurs here who want to build nomad communities and the real estate for that. So I definitely don't feel lonely anymore in trying to bring people here. Now there is a stronger foundation for that.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I was there, David Friedman was there, and his main feedback for you guys was there. Hey, the infrastructure is amazing here, but there aren't enough people. And even though that was at the time, at the height of these 3 months of, I don't even know what to say,
The
craziness,
pop-up city, yeah.
pop-up city.
David Friedman was in Las Verandas, though, right? So our center was a bit more in Duna. So partly I agree with him, right? So especially like the Las Verandas Pristine Bay part is often very empty. But so he's correct, right? So that's the main thing, to bring more people to create density.
Well, it's a work in progress, but the question is, how's the work in progress? What's the status?
So now we have the Biofrontiers theme month. So now Duna is full, right? So the Duna Tower is full for September and likely including October and November as well, because we're working with Venture Launch, which is a Solana crypto nomad community focused on longevity and on mental health, right? So for the rest of the year, it will be basically pop-up city. We'll be booked out. And then next year, February, we haven't announced it yet. We'll likely do another pop-up city. So we're actually starting to hit the constraint. But at the same time, we're not there yet, right? So August, we just came from August, and August is kind of the lowest season month here, right? So during August, the Duna Tower was maybe half full, right? So that means like 30, 40 people in the Duna Tower. So it can make it feel quite empty, right? On some days, there's just like 3 or 4 people in the co-working space. So it's a bit up and down still. But there's increasingly, and now that we have the Duna Tower for about a year, it's getting to more and more permanent people. There is now a new real estate project called Contrarian Village, which is building real estate for another 50 people. So I think we're on good track to, and I think once we're at a point where we have a permanent population of 150, a Dunbar number, then it will be more self-reinforcing. There is really a lot of value from people coming to come here. And then it's just much easier to sell. And then it's also network effects coming from it, because everyone who's coming makes it more likely and adds more value to the next person coming.
Yeah, right. I mean, even when I arrived, it was like, how do you even get food here? And 1 week later, a restaurant opened for like 15 minutes from the place where I was living, right? And then, like 2 weeks later, there was finally food being sold in the coffee place in the place where I was living, right? So the things I could just see the improvements I have only spent 3 months there, but I could see with my own eyes a new city, a new country is being built out of the jungle, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Wow. I quite enjoyed that I was able to pay with Bitcoin everywhere. In fact, not just able to pay, but that was kind of like a preferred payment system. So that's not the full story. There are other ways to pay there. So what's the status of payment systems in there?
Sure. I'm pretty sure there is no higher crypto adoption anywhere in the world than in Prospera. And probably also that extends to the rest of the island, right? So in Prospera, we're very crypto native. A large part of the reason is that the Honduran banking system cut us off. That was one reason. So going to crypto was necessary to manage our companies. But also we're all pro crypto, right? And we have different camps, right? So there's Bitcoiners in Prospera, there's Solana people and Ethereum people. And the philosophy is may the best one win. So it's a competitive ecosystem. You can pay your taxes in crypto and Prospera. You can do it through Solana, Ethereum, USDC, and Bitcoin. Prospera has even a Solana-based Prospera tax credit, so you can prepay taxes for a discount. So there's a lot of adoption here. I even bought my apartment through a loan that I got from Aave, which is a permissionless lending protocol, which is fascinating, right? Because in the Honduran banking system, it would be very hard for me to get a loan for something like that, right? So that is really cool and open itself to all sorts of opportunities for like, real world assets, tokenization, and things like that. With Infinita, we also have our own stablecoin based payment token, right? So kind of competing with USDC. So it's called Lives, and you use it also for daily transactions here. You onboard most of the businesses here, and we give our users incentives to use it. Like you can buy at the discount and you get these reward points that then unlock all sorts of other benefits. So it's a very vibrant ecosystem for payments and for financial services that's emerging here.
How well does these new payment systems work? Do you have problems accepting them?
Yeah. The main problem is when you touch fiat. So that's kind of my thesis that made me develop Lives. I think many people that are not in crypto have the impression that crypto is super complex and fiat is super easy. And that's kind of true because you already learned it for like decades and because everyone accepts fiat and you already have your bank account. But once you have like an international business or travel a lot and things like that, or when you try to have like corporate banking and things like that, then you learn actually crypto is a lot better in many of these areas. And not to speak of like the permissionlessness and censorship resistance and all of that, like the hedge against inflation, really just as a practical tool. So I think, and my thesis is, if you actually went to someone who had no idea about either crypto or fiat, actually crypto would be really simple and fiat really complex. Now, the problem for crypto is that everyone is using fiat right now, right? So if you want to convince someone who's using fiat right now to use crypto, they have to add crypto to it. Like they don't reduce the complexity of fiat, right? Because they still have fiat and other people accept fiat. On top of that, you have all the on and off ramps. So it is true that while crypto on its own, in an isolated fashion, would be easier, for the average person, it's harder to use. So therefore, the idea was, okay, we need to create a 100% crypto native ecosystem where someone can come and can only transact in crypto. And we are making it easy for the vendors in the fiat economy to do that. So this is why the vendors we work with, like the restaurants, the coffee shops, the transportation services, the rentals and real estate, they receive the token from our users, right? And it's pegged to the dollar. So it's 1-to-1. So it's simple. And then we do the off ramp with them right now manually. And in the future, we automate that, right? So this way, they don't have to care about all these fiat interactions. We do that for them. We reduce the complexity and allow our users to transact only in crypto.
Yeah, it seemed to me quite easy. The most peculiar thing, maybe, that I noticed is that many places where locals are, let's say, working in a restaurant, and in Bitcoin world, we're still talking about that how slow the blockchain is and expensive the transactions are, and Lightning doesn't work yet well. But when I was there, they wouldn't be able to accept a Bitcoin transaction because they only know Lightning, and you know what, it never had like a problem. So yeah, it was just great to see that, hey, you can live on Bitcoin and not just like on-chain Bitcoin, but Lightning Network Bitcoin in everyday life. So that was great. That was great. But you know what? I just realized the main theme of this podcast series is actually longevity. So perhaps we should talk about that a little bit. What's the longevity projects that you guys have in Prospera?
Yeah. So with Infinita City, we're aiming to build a biotech district within Prospera, and by extension, expanding into other places in the world, kind of a longevity network state, right? And the problem that we see is what I talked about in the beginning. There's all these regulations, like especially the FDA, which causes new drugs and treatments to take more than 14 years to go to market, 14, 1, 4, and costing more than 400 million. That's exceedingly slow, right? And the example I often give is sort of the COVID vaccine is based on a genome sequence on technology that's like several decades old. And you just had to adapt it to new variants with the new genome sequence, but then it had to go through approval again, which made no sense because the risk profile is still the same, right? So especially modern gene and cell therapies have a different risk profile than small molecules. But the FDA and other regulators try to just get them through the same approval and regulatory system. And also, longevity itself is just a fundamentally different paradigm to existing healthcare, which is often called a sick care system or system palliation, right? So you get cancer treatments that let you live like 2 or 3 years longer when they occur. Right, then the FDA explicitly regulates or approves therapies and drugs only for what they call clinical endpoints. And clinical endpoints is basically a list of diseases, like there's the various forms of cancers, ALS, Alzheimer's, a very long list of things. Now, aging, longevity paradigm is basically saying that aging is causing all these other diseases, right? So the process of aging has comorbidity with all these other diseases. And if we treat aging itself directly, preventatively before these diseases occur, we can reduce multiple diseases at the same time, right? So it's inherently preventative, precision medicine, personalized medicine. But the problem is you can't get that approved, right? So aging is not considered a disease. You can't get a drug approved that say we treat the aging process. There's a bit of progress in that space, right? So the WHO, the World Health Organization, now has a new category that includes aging sort of as a category, which the FDA does not accept yet. But that is a fundamental problem, right? And if we always compare it to space travel, right? So Elon Musk's thesis was, if we want to become a spacefaring species, it needs to be cost effective to do so. And what do we need for it to be cost effective? We need reusable rockets. That's the first thing he worked on. And same with longevity. If we want to have radical life extension and have treatments that add 10, 20, or more years to your life, we need to radically reduce the cost of R&D, which is something that is not something that should be inherently that expensive, because the costs were more than 100 times lower only like 60 or 7 years ago. So this is not inherently necessary. It's really a matter of the institutions. And, there's alternatives like private certificatory systems, safety trials only, alternative trial designs, and simply also patients or people's right to choose, right? Sort of have the autonomy that you decide on the risk profile that you're willing to take, rather than on waiting the FDA to clear it for 14 years. You say, as long as you're well informed and you give consent and all of that, and as long as there's some oversight, that's fine, right? So there's alternative regulatory pathways we can design. So that is what we try to do with Infinita City. We try to unlock longevity, right? To be actually able to develop new drugs and treatments for 5 to 10 times cheaper and faster, right? So we are able to develop all these things that we need to actually solve aging.
Let me pick up with that Elon Musk a little bit, with autonomous driving. That let's say Elon puts an autonomous driving car onto the street. It hits a person, even though it hits a person like 100 times less often than human driver hits that person. The media is going to go all gung ho about that a car that has no driver is killed a person, right? Very. I don't know what's the name of this economic phenomena. You might even know that, but a very similar situation can be imagined in Prospera as well. That you guys are doing gene editing, and I know people cyborg operations, and eventually someone may or not may. If you're successful, then someone will die just by necessity of innovation. Yeah. Uh, what what's your plan?
Sure, and just to give some color to what you said, like why is the media always opposing new technology? So we're not unique in Prospera or with Infinita, right? So there is this Twitter account called the Pessimist Archive, which gives you all this historical anecdotes where people were resisting credit cards, fax machines, printers, and bicycles. Why would people resist bicycles? It's like, what are you talking about, right? So it's this kind of ingrained effect in human nature of sorts, which has, I think, to do with the disruption that technology causes on the societal order in some sense, right? So Niccolo Machiavelli, the famous political theorist, more than 500 years ago, had this quote where he's saying that the innovator is kind of in perilous danger, right? Because he has for enemies everyone who's thriving under the existing order and has the existing wealth and laws on their side. And as allies, only kind of the ones who would benefit from a change in the status quo, but are often kind of, too frightened to go with you, right? So why is it that we get any technological change in history, right? So, and when you analyze the history of technology, the what's really important is that you're innovating really fast, that you're innovating so fast that the regulators can catch up, just like the internet, or in a decentralized way, like Bitcoin. So Bitcoin, that was where like the true genius of it is that there was no one to censor. So it was a permissionless, autonomous protocol in a way with its own incentives. So that was kind of a brilliant move. In our case, that will be a bit harder because we're there in the physical world. You can't take drugs online. You can't build a city in the cloud. You can, but it's not what we're going for. We're not going for the metaverse. We want to do something in the real world. So we're a bit more visible. And how do we overcome that? The most important mechanism is to put benefits into people's hands, right? How you need to grow fast by building a base of passionate users, right? That's how Uber succeeded, right? So you have users advocate for you because they benefit from you. And in our case, we do that through creating lots of jobs and through creating people that take the therapies and advocate for it, like Brian Johnson taking the therapy, or recently Khloe Kardashian, and kind of showing people, this is something that people use, it's legitimate. And on top of that, I think it's important to do things in a way that are justifiable and scalable. So not everything that the FDA does is wrong, right? It's good to have oversight. It's good to have oversight, especially when it comes to safety. Like what happens if something goes wrong? There's adverse events reporting. There's emergency hospital transfer rules and things like that. That is good. That is fine. And you should do the same things, right? We also need to generate information on efficacy, right? There should be consequences for like fraudulent labeling, right? There's laws against fraud and all of that. So I think it's very important to build an alternative to the existing system that is as good and better in many ways. Safety is not the part where to compromise on, but there's of course inherent risk in everything. Like every drug always has side effects. So that means you need to just have a protocol for oversight what happens if something goes wrong, that then shows everyone who was doing that did so responsibly and aware of the risk. Like the person that's taking it gave informed consent. There is oversight that the informed consent is actually like informed and is actually consent. There's registries. There's a protocol of what happens if there are side effects and what is kind of the emergency protocol if something happens. So it's very important when setting things up, right? Because as you can imagine, when something goes wrong here, like one person like dying or having side effects, there's going to be like 1,000x magnifying glass on this. Right? I think another way to do things is also we're not like going straight to the most crazy stuff, right? The real frontier of science and longevity is not happening in Prospera yet, right? That's happening in the United States. There's like replacement research and like building synthetic organs and stuff like that. That's not happening here. Like people like that are attracted to come here and kind of explore it. But what we think is the better opportunity for Prospera is to take things that we know work. And we know gene therapies and cell therapies work. Like not all of them work, but some do. Like there is a known risk profile. There is several dozens of gene therapies that are approved, but they cost several hundreds of thousands or millions just because of the very high development costs. So we can just take some version or some of these treatments and develop them further and iterate with them and give it to people for much more cheaply. So Unlimited Bio is a very good example for that. They took a VEGF gene therapy that is already approved since 2011 in Russia and has treated more than 10,000 patients. So we know the safety profile. We have reasonable efficacy data. They're repurposing it now for other things. And that is, I think, where the real low-hanging fruit is, right? So things that we have that we already know are safe and just get it into a market segment that doesn't have access to it before.
Yeah, let's talk about the gene therapies a little bit. So, firstly, you mentioned Brian Johnson. Brian Johnson went to Prospera to get the folistatin gene therapy, and actually, it's not even in Prospera. It's in Honduras. It's in Roatan, the GARM clinic. So that's
That
about.
clinic is incorporated in Prospera, though.
It's incorporated in Prospera. Okay, okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. I didn't know that.
So it's
Even
under
though I went
Prospera,
to
which
that
is actually really cool, right? So Prospera is not just in this one place. It actually has lands in several other parts of the island, right? So there's this office building called the Johnson Building that's outside. The GARM clinic is outside. They're incorporated in Prospera. They're under their laws. Prospera has land in the northern part of the island, and it even has land on mainland Honduras next to La Ceiba, which is a port city. So that is intended to be like the manufacturing center of the world in the future.
So what's the point? The point is that he went to get the folistatin gene therapy, and that's the mini circle guys were doing that. But when I was there, I was not. I didn't meet them. I have no idea where they were. But there were the unlimited bio or unlimited bio.
Unlimited
Perhaps
bio,
they
yeah, yeah.
changed. I don't know.
No, the
Okay.
unlimited bio is because the URL wasn't available.
Okay. All right. Yeah, and I, by the way, did an interview with those guys when I was there, so feel free to check it out. Anyhow, they brought the VEGF gene therapy, and they also are bringing a folistatin gene therapy. They brought it to Prospera, and actually, I was considering doing the folistatin gene therapy, and I emailed a doctor, the guy who got Khloe Kardashian to do the VEGF gene therapy, because I saw on the internet that he was talking about the folistatin stuff as well. But my understanding was that his clinic was in, I think, in
Yeah.
Mexico, right? So did the Kardashian went to Prospera or Mexico?
To Mexico. They didn't yet come to Prospera. Brian Johnson was here in Prospera, though.
But they got the Unlimited Bios,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
which is a Prosperan company, and the guys are still living there.
So Unlimited Bio spends about like 2-3 months here per year.
All right. Well, one thing that people might of this channel might be interested in going there is the gene therapies. What else? Why would a longevity, let's say a longevity athlete, not just someone who wants to do some new longevity project, but someone who want to get some gene
Yeah.
editing or health boost. Why
Yeah.
would they go?
Yeah, so I think the main reason would be for the treatments if they're interested in them. I'm always a bit careful not to sell it as like a longevity wellness paradise. Where it's got some options, the gym and all of that, but you've been there and you know that, the blood testing didn't work and there's not like an abundance of different or healthy food options, right? So we can't compete with like a Bali or something like that yet. Right. So it's interesting if you're curious about these therapies and if you want to meet other entrepreneurs in that space or want to build something on your own, right? We're actively looking for entrepreneurs who want to help us build like a longevity wellness district and like a longevity protocol where we can also have like continuous glucose monitoring and blood testing and all of that. So that's not there yet. I wish I had the time to build several businesses at the same time. This is not a part we put a lot of time into, unfortunately, but we really would like to and need help with.
All right, I understand. I guess my last question is still from the time when I was there. There were the Drapers coming to Prospera. What's the aftermath of that thingy? Did it air? What happened to the companies? Who got in the yeah? What was even this whole thing?
Yeah. So I'm not supposed to reveal the conclusion of the episode in which were the companies that won, but I can say there were 4 contestants, which include Unlimited Bio, Muse Bio, which is developing stem cells from menstrual blood, Blink, which is a Bitcoin wallet, and the Network Bank, which is a crypto-friendly bank here in Prospera. So these 4 contestants were competing against each other until a Shark Tank-like competition. But we had several more, like 15 more startups that we selected who also pitched to Tim and Adam Draper just before, right? So we really try to help companies that come here and founders to succeed by getting them funding, helping them with pitch training and these kind of things. So, and the Draper Challenge was a major boost to that. Several of the companies got investments from Tim Draper. Prosper got investment from it. And the episode I heard is going to air in November.
All right, all right. Well, congrats for that. I've seen when I was there. I watched around 20 episodes of the Draper Show, right? Or even maybe even more. But the Prosperon projects were much stronger than the ones that I've seen in the episodes. So that was great to see. That was great to see.
Yeah, that's kind of amazing, right? So we're in like a island in Honduras, and we can compete with cities like Los Angeles or New York or Buenos Aires in terms of the quality of startups, which is pretty cool.
Contrarian question time. Do you know the contrarian question?
Do I know a contrarian question?
Do you know the contrarian question?
What is your thing you believe about the world that nobody else does?
Yeah, exactly. So what is it?
Yeah, I don't know. I actually have several. Like, I actually have an Apple Note with several contrarian insights. So I don't know which one I would pick from, but maybe what's most relevant to this conversation is that a lot of people think of longevity as a challenge of public opinion. We just need to convince more people to like vote for policies that make it easier for us or give longevity more funding. And I actually say that is actually the reverse is true. So public opinion will follow longevity companies and treatments and things like that being successful. So we need to do things right now. We can't wait for the public to approve it or for politicians or regulators to permit it, right? So we need to do something now, which is kind of the thesis that what I'm doing now is based on, which is probably not super contrarian in our circles, right?
Not in our circles, but there
But
is like a majority part of the world that believes that they should be enforcing their rules on us,
yeah,
even if we are not hurting them in any way.
I also think here's another contrarian thesis, right? So that might be a bit more controversial in our circles, right? So I'm not the biggest fan of governance innovation in crypto and especially DAOs. I think they have largely failed to innovate. They're like regressing and they're less innovative than existing traditional corporate structures. And I think it is actually corporate innovation is very underrated. So we think of like corporations as something that's like very traditional, very paper based, and all of that. But actually, what many people realize is that corporate innovation was largely a free market for like several hundreds of years. So the corporations and the joint stock company, the kind of insurance mechanisms, the governance mechanisms, and the bylaws. When you're a founder, actually run into legal issues, which any mature founder will do at some point, then you kind of learn what it's all there for. And like the ability to form like different cooperatives and like clubs or Swiss associations, nonprofits. There's actually like a huge or enormous variety of underrated innovation in traditional corporate structures, right? So, I don't like the paper-based aspect either, right? I'd like things to be tokenized, like I'm a crypto native, but I do think sort of the next wave of governance innovation in crypto should really kind of work backwards from existing or understand some of these existing and traditional corporate structures much better. And I also think corporations are superior to governments, right? So I'm attracted to the sort of snow crash idea that the world is run by corporations, which people think is something that is sort of scary or evil or something like that. But then again, corporations never go to war, never murder people, and they might sell you like bad products or bad stuff, but you can just say no, right? With governments, you can't do that when they want taxes from you and impose their products on you, right?
Yeah, I actually am on board with that vision, Niklas. Thank you very much for coming, and personally, thank you very much for supporting me in with the longevity World Cup in the beginning, because you helped me in some sense, helped me to kickstart the project. And just today, the 100th athlete was just registered. So hooray!
Amazing.
Yeah, thank you very much for
Keep
coming.
at it. Thanks for that. And also thanks for your support and for spending so much time with us and bringing your project and yourself to it. And also thanks for this interview and for showing this to your listeners. And thanks everyone for listening as well.
And go to Prospera.
See you at the frontier.